back to the Act Two podcast, a podcast for the real-life working screenwriter. I am Tasha Hugh.
And I am Josh Hallman.
And we are back after a small hiatus.
Yeah.
Wherein...
You got married.
Oh, I got married.
You got married, yeah. Tasha saw Shaman as well.
To the editor of our show, Paul Lundquist, who's amazing. But yeah, we went to a shaman out in the redwoods. Story for another time. We got blessed. And then we also got a puppy. So it was a busy week off. And I think it's only right we come back with a huge bang and welcome screenwriter Zach Baylin to our show.
Yes. Zach, say hello and introduce yourself.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
All right, so here's the deal. I met Zach on a tennis court. And I said, hey, what's up, man? I'm Josh. And he's like, I'm Zach. I'm like, cool. We exchanged pleasantries. He's like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a screenwriter. And he's like, oh, cool. Like, what have you written? I was like, nothing that you would have. It's like all in development hell. I'm like, what about you? He was like, King Richard. I was like, damn. Okay, never mind. Never mind.
At what stage, by the way, of King Richard was this?
This was like 6 months ago.
What?
Yeah. It was. It was probably 6 months ago. So it had come out, I guess. I don't think I was. I hope I wasn't that rude about the way I approached it. But
King Richard.
That's kind of yeah. A little movie. You might.
Yo, bitch, fucking King Richard, motherfucker. No. Actually, it was funny how you said it because I remember you being like, you said it in a way where it was like, oh yeah, of course. It's like. It's fucking King Richard. And I remember being like, oh, wow, okay. But then anyway, Zach and I had hung out. We've played tennis. We've talked. I found out he's been on other podcasts. I took offense to that. And I was like, dude, will you please come on the Act Two podcast so we can talk to you about your screenwriting career, King Richard, and everything else. And he finally agreed to come on after a lot of pressure. And so thank you again for coming on.
My memory is that I agreed right away. And then I went and listened to the podcast, thought it was terrific. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so where to begin?
Josh, I hope you have questions that he's never heard before.
I've asked a lot of these questions to him already, so I'm going to ask him again because there's things I've asked him before that I was like, I just couldn't believe it. But this was the first time I checked out Zach's IMDb right 5 minutes ago before this started, so I could list off some of the things you're writing right now. You're writing Creed 3, or you've written
Boom.
Creed 3.
Yeah, I co-wrote Creed 3. Yeah, the trailer actually I think just came out like 5 minutes ago.
Oh, really?
Oh, shit. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Dude,
So we'll have to.
what are we doing?
I haven't seen it yet. Yeah, we'll watch it afterwards. Have a live reaction pod. Yeah.
Creed 3, The Crow,
Yep.
Gran Turismo. Can I say that?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that announced?
I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know ultimately like where like credit wise how that'll work out, but I did a couple months on it like as they were headed into production, and they're shooting right now. So that was a cool project to come on in.
So Zach, how did you get started in screenwriting? What happened? Can you give us the life story?
Yeah, I'll give you the truncated life story. I mean, I really wanted to be a writer like since college. I went to the Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and it was just like a film dork. I used to, when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time like hanging out at this neighborhood video store, and I studied screenwriting in college, and then I moved to New York, but really with no connections in the film industry, and so I was really naive about what the pathway to actually being a working writer was. And this was at a time when people were still sort of selling spec scripts in the way that like Shane Black used to sell scripts, and so there was still that idea that like you could just come out of nowhere and write a script and sell it and then have a career. And so I sort of naively thought, that I'll just do that. And then I started writing like an indie Western that I was like, this will be the big spec sale that I'm looking for. That script never sold. I wrote...
An indie Western?
Yeah, it's surprising that no one was looking. Period, too.
That's Tasha's territory.
You and me both. That was my first script, too.
Yeah.
I haven't sold it yet either.
Yeah. Maybe we'd be a double feature someday. But so, while I was trying to figure out the pathway to actually having like a career, I started PAing and I ended up working on set for a long time. So I did various jobs in the art department, and I ended up getting in the union in New York where I was living. So then I was working on, I did 3 seasons of Gossip Girl as a prop, and I worked on The Blacklist and Boardwalk Empire, and like a lot of TV that was filming in New York and some movies. But the whole time I was writing, and I met this screenwriter named Johnny Rosenthal, who was a really funny guy and who had written a lot of comedies in like the kind of Will Ferrell vein in that time. And he was doing really well, and he was super nice and read a script of mine and sent it to his manager. And that began a very long process where those managers turned down every script I sent for like 10 years. But then I wrote one, and a junior manager there read it and was like, oh, I think I know a production company that might want to option this. So that was sort of like my first like foot in the door. But that never got made. And King Richard was the first script of mine that got made. And it was, 20 years after I sort of started trying to do it. So
I feel like I have several follow-up questions. How did you meet the screenwriter who passed your script along?
I met Johnny because I was an art PA on a movie called Winter Passing, which was Ed Harris, Will Ferrell kind of indie that Focus Features made. And Johnny was like around set because he was doing another movie with the producer. So a mutual friend of his and mine, this woman named Erin, put us in touch, and because she had read this script that I wrote, and so she gave it to Johnny. There was a lot of drinking after work on that set, as I remember, and Johnny was hanging around a lot, and so we just got to be friendly, and he agreed to read the script, and he was just really, really supportive from the beginning. So he kept sending his, I wrote 3 or 4 scripts over the course of 8 years that I sent to Johnny, and he sent them. He sent them all to his manager. So it took a long time just to get that little foot in. And I was not a very good networker. Like I was in New York, and I didn't really realize that most of the people I was going to need to know to read scripts and to be an advocate were probably going to be in LA, and so I was sort of stubbornly kept doing it the same way.
Yeah, well,
I can relate.
I mean, it's a question that a lot of writers come to us with too. Is, well, how many scripts is too much to send to the same person? How many scripts is the manager going to read before I really need to just stop sending them stuff and they hate me? And I guess it sounds like this manager read 4 of your scripts before he or she was like, oh, like Zach has some talent and I'd be willing to read him, or like take a meeting with him rather.
I don't know for sure if that manager, how many of them the manager read, but Johnny read them.
Okay.
So I felt like, or at least said he read them and sent them along. But so I felt like okay to continue. Probably because I had like a middleman who was advocating for me. I was not in contact with those managers at all until I never spoke to them until like 8 years later. I got an email from one of them. And
what?
So I don't know. It's tricky because you could certainly like flood someone's inbox, and then they might just, even if it was good, they might just get pissed off and be like, I'm not going to read it. Like this, why does this person keep emailing me? But it's such a like catch-22 of all that stuff, because like you need someone to kind of vouch for you to get a good read, but you need a good read for someone to vouch for you, and it's really shitty that's the way to get in. But
I saw that you were on the blacklist before King Richard. This is correct?
Yeah, I think I had 2 scripts on the blacklist before King Richard. Eventually, that script that I got optioned, and I got a manager out of that. And then the next script I wrote was sort of a big kind of James Elroy, L.A. Confidential-y noir script. And that script got on the blacklist, and I got my first agent out of that. And so I remember being on I was working in the prop department on this kids TV show called The Electric Company in New York, and I was like microwaving diner food to bring to like the kid actors on set, and I got a call from an agent who was at William Morris at the time. It was like, oh, I read your script on the Blacklist and like wondering if you would like to be represented. And it was pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
Sorry, to take a step back from that, when you had your first script optioned, did you parlay that in, and like, did you then contact managers yourself and you were like, hey, I just optioned a script, I'm looking for representation, or did that organically happen?
No, so that first script was like a little kind of contained thriller. It was like a little Hitchcockian movie. And the manager I'd been sending those scripts through Johnny to for all those years, a junior manager at that company read the script and then contacted me. And at the time, I would remember, now this is all coming back, when that guy contacted me, I was working in the art department on this like home makeover show called Splurge and Save, where we like went in and we did people's living rooms and stuff. And so I got a call from that guy and was like, I read your script. I think that there's a company I know that's looking to make these kind of movies, and we've already shared it with them, and they're interested in optioning it and trying to put it together. So at that point, and it was sort of a package deal that like that guy would become my manager if I wanted to go down that route. So that's how that happened.
Wish we could get a TV show of you doing your jobs and getting good news, like what you're doing you're like making coffee on Splurge and Save, and you're like, get this call, you're like, hey.
It's definitely an indie movie about how a writer becomes a professional screenwriter.
I have a lot of those memories because I mean I didn't get like a paycheck really as a writer, until I was 35 or something. So I had 15 years of working in film production where I was either getting mostly bad calls from someone I had sent the script to. It was like, oh, no, actually we did read it and we didn't call you back because we hated it. And
right.
And then eventually, like, I remember being I was a prop on the show The Blacklist, the James Spader show. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of jumping ahead in my timeline a little bit, but I had I had a TV pilot that I was trying to go out with, and I was not normally the on-set person on the show. I was working in the truck. And the on-set prop had to like go on a run, and so they're like, can you go in and just do this scene with Spader where you have to like, all you have to do is like zip tie his hands behind his back before he goes on set, because he's like, he's been taken hostage, and we have fake zip ties, so there's slip, he can just take them off. And I was like, sure. And so I was in there, and I have never really interacted with Spader. He's kind of intimidating, and I was like, oh, Mr. Spader, I'm just going to zip tie your hands behind your back and see it's a fake zip tie, so you can just take them off. And he was like, no, I want the real one.
Method.
Yeah. I was like, who am I to tell Spader how to do his job? So I'm like, okay. And so I zip tied his hands shut, and then my phone rang. And, obviously you're not supposed to take a phone call on set, but it was these producers on the TV show that I was trying to take out. So I was like, I probably have time to step outside real quick. So I stepped outside, and it was a producer with probably the best news I'd ever had at the time, in my career, that like we had an actor had just signed on to the script, and there were studios who were interested in buying it, and it was like, they're like, we need you to come out to LA. And meanwhile, I was on this call, and I guess the whole production was like looking for me, and I had to go back inside the set. I was like, what's going on? And they're like, Spader's trying to get his handcuffs off, and he couldn't get them off, and everyone was like freaking out, and there was like some grip who had taken out like a box cutter and was about to like slice his hands. And, it was a bad day on set. But
did you get fired? I'm surprised you wouldn't.
I think I left the next day because I was like, I'm sorry, I have to go.
I'm done. I'm out.
Can I ask, in terms of the timeline, when you got your first paycheck, A, what was it? And then B, how far away from getting your manager was that?
And honestly, it was 7 years after I got my manager. So that script, it was a television show that I wrote. Like, I wrote the pilot speculatively, and it was like a 1 hour kind of conspiracy thriller. And I showed it to my manager and my agent at the time, the one who had called me from when I was on the electric company. And, I'd been working with them for 6 or 7 years and had never gotten a job. I'd had tons of generals. I'd developed things with producers. I'd had a few things where there was like, I'd gotten a rewrite, and then when it came time to actually like commence, they were like, oh, we're actually not going to do it. And so it had been a really long, frustrating, that period was maybe more frustrating than like before, when I was like just blindly hopeful, but didn't have representation. Anyway, I sent this TV pilot to my reps at the time, and it took them forever to read it, I remember, and eventually that agent called me and was like, I did read the script, and I don't think you can sell it, and I don't think I should be your agent anymore. Wow. And my manager, I believe, had gotten fired from his management company at that point and was kind of had left. So I had this script that I thought was really good, and at that point I was like, I don't know anyone else, because I hadn't really come to LA. I hadn't done the thing, and I knew this one guy named Jeff Silver, who now runs Grandview, and which is a management company. And I had met Jeff when he was also doing some producing, and I was like, I heard you're starting a management company. I happen to be looking for a manager, and you're the only person I know who's a manager. And I'm like, I have the script and I think it's good. So I sent that script to Jeff, and Jeff and a guy there named Zach read the script and they're like, we think this is really good, and we think we can put it together. So
that's insane. So one script lost you your agent, but gained you a new rep. Like, that just really shows how subjective these reads can be.
It really is. I mean, I tell people a lot that, like, it's one, not be discouraged about when you're sending scripts out, and if you really believe in it, and that, even if you do get like someone who will read it and that feels like a great opportunity, it might just be the wrong person who read it. And it doesn't mean that, like, people have niches that they're looking for, or people have certain tastes, and you really kind of, it's hard to hit that bullseye where you're both like getting an opportunity to share your script with someone who can actually do something, and it's someone who is right for that material. And so that's kind of a crapshoot.
Wow. So you get this manager, you're thriving, your career is now on the up and up. I think the next logical question is, like, what do you think of my tennis game? Like, what do you think my strong assets are?
Tasha, have you seen Josh play tennis?
I've never played tennis with him ever, and I want him to give me lessons, but I'm also scared because I've heard that he tries to, like, deliberately bean people sometimes.
Get out of here.
He's aggressive out there. No, he's a phenomenal tennis player, and I sense sometimes that he just allows me to hit with him so he can have screenwriting
chat, yeah. But it's very valuable time.
But it's okay. I'll take it.
So, we should hit again sometime. I guess where does King Richard come into this story? So you have your reps, and then I guess when did you get your reps at Grandview? And you have told me this story. I'm just trying to put the pieces together because I think it's so freaking interesting and almost kind of inspiring how it all came to be. So yeah, I guess the gap from you have your manager, and then from when you get your manager, how do you get the meeting for King Richard, and then how did that all come to be?
I got my manager. That show I was talking about, we did end up taking out, and that show sold. So I spent a year sort of developing that show at TNT, and that show never got made, but it was like my first sort of real experience where I was working with the network, where I was working with producers, doing real notes and revisions, and it was a really good experience and learning curve, even though it never moved forward. But then, because that show sold and there was an announcement and whatever, all that stuff, like then I went and started putting together pitches and meeting other, doing like the generals that were, now I sort of understood a little bit more about how to make those productive and really try to build, a lot. I thought originally you're going on these, like what a lot of people pejoratively call is like these water bottle tours, and that I was just going to go in a room and be like, oh, what do you have for me?
Yeah.
Like what great material are you like going to hire me to write? And really it's not like, they're like blind dates where you're just really trying to meet people who you, it's like, have similar interests, who you align on projects and creative with, and then you're like, I don't know, maybe 2 years later, if you're just shooting back ideas back and forth with those people who you now like have a relationship with, something might emerge. And I didn't really realize how much of it was just like a relationship building. And so I developed a couple projects with producers, and so between that TV show and King Richard, I sold a feature pitch. I sold another TV thing, and I was working. So at that point, I had like a job every year.
Was that able to keep you going so that you didn't have to have another day job during this time, or were you also working in props?
Yeah.
Still? Okay.
No, I stopped working in props. I went back, Josh, you'll like this. I went back and did like 2 days on an episode of Billions that my friend was prop mastering on, because Damian Lewis's character was playing tennis against Maria Sharapova.
No way.
In some scene. And the prop master knew that I was a big tennis fan. I was like, do you want to come and just like feed balls to them?
Oh my gosh.
During, like the different sides of it. So I think that was the last prop thing I did.
I'm just gonna plant this here on the podcast right now. If there's ever another tennis thing in your life and like you're playing with like Federer or like Nadal and they're like, he needs someone to hit with, I'll drop it. I'll do anything. I'll be there.
If I had known you during King Richard, you would have been a huge asset, because there was
don't say this.
We needed hitting partners constantly, and there was
Josh, you would have loved it.
There was just every day on that set, Josh was on a tennis court with like, some former tennis pro coming by to hit with the actresses or to, give context on like matches. And then during lunch, I just brought my racket every day.
Oh my God.
And I would make them. For another podcast.
God. Yeah.
Josh, you need to write a tennis movie. Get your tennis rom-com going or something.
My tennis rom-com. Yeah.
There's this, I'll mispronounce his name, Luca Guadagnini, the guy who directed Call Me By Your Name and Bones and All, the new Shyamalan movie. He's doing a tennis movie right now with Zendaya and the guy from West Side Story, and it's like they've had a lot of tennis bros coming back and forth.
This is
through
fucking bullshit.
Okay,
keep going. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Tangential.
Fuck.
Anyway, actually, this is useful. So, obviously, I'm like a tennis fan, and that TV show that I had sold was a conspiracy thriller that was set in the world of professional tennis.
Oh,
amazing!
And I felt like I had a good background. I'd done a lot of research into tennis. Whatever. 5 years later, I was on a general meeting in New York with this producer, Tim White, and it was about a different project, and we were like hit it off in that meeting, and we, that project was cool, and I was interested in it. But on the sort of, as I was leaving the meeting, I was going to the U.S. Open to watch a match, and I mentioned it to Tim, and Tim was like, "Oh, if you like tennis, like I have an idea for a movie that I've been trying to get off the ground for a long time," and that was a movie about the Williams family. And so I stayed and we talked about it for like another 20 minutes, and he was like, if you're interested, if you think you can figure out what it is, because we haven't cracked, he's like, I know that their family story is is really powerful and that Richard is an interesting character, but we don't know what it would be. And he's like, but we also have another writer that we're like kind of about to maybe sign a contract with. So he's like, you'd have to figure out something very quickly. And so I just jumped on it. I knew it was like a huge idea, and so I took like a weekend and I just consumed everything I could in that period of time and felt like I had found the core of what I thought the movie could be. And I sent Tim and his brother Trevor, who they're producing partners, just this like, what would have been a pitch, but I just, wrote it in a long sort of stream of consciousness email. And honestly, that's like the best thing I've ever written, that email. And it was really like the whole movie just like kind of was there. And then they were like, okay, if you want to do it, like we'd love you to do it. We won't hire this other person. But they're like, also, we don't have the rights to the family.
So they dropped that afterwards, by the way.
No. I think I probably knew that.
Okay, because that's often a tactic they use. So.
No, I think it was. I think we talked about like what the process of, we could go at that point and take this pitch to Venus and Serena, right, and say, like, look, we have a really clear idea. I'm sure other people have approached you about doing your story, but this is how we would approach it. And at that point, I had I'd sold a show, but I had no credits. And Tim and Trevor were like really successful young producers who had they'd helped develop The Post, that Spielberg movie, and had made Ingrid Goes West. And, I think were making a name for themselves, but they also probably didn't feel like they were at the place where they could just take out a pitch that was going to get Venus and Serena. So I think we all collectively decided that the best chance was to actually bring them a concrete, fully formed project, a finished script, and say like, this is what we want to do. And then maybe I think we thought if we could get a piece of talent attached to it, that would help as well, and like a filmmaker or an actor. And so that was the plan.
Was there any hesitation on your part to, I'm assuming, write this on spec and have to go through what would presumably be a very long process? Or were you so impassioned by the material that you were like, I absolutely want to write this story regardless?
I really felt like it was a unique opportunity, that it was worth taking a risk. They did pay me a little bit, okay. So it was nice to I didn't feel like, it was not a lot of money, but it was enough that I felt like, okay, I could still like feed my family while I took that risk. But really it was like I felt like, as a writer who does not have access to like, some huge piece of IP, that I felt like that was this idea was the closest that I was really going to get to having my hands on something that was going to be that appealing to studios in that way. That even though we didn't have the rights to it, like you can't just go and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to write a Batman movie and then maybe DC will buy it. Like, but I did feel like that, there is this wiggle room with true stories with public figures where we probably could have made, like, legally could have made that movie without their involvement. It's factual. There's no, like, we had legal teams look at the script before it went out. Like, I did like massively annotated versions of it where I sourced everything from.
Oh wow!
But that was never what we wanted to do. We knew we wanted their involvement. We knew the movie ultimately would be better if we could interview them and actually get some stories that are not in the public space. So all to say, like it was a risk, but it was also, I'm sure you both of you have like found times where you're writing something and I was like, I could research that thing like for 2 years and I would have been fascinated with it. Like that part of it, like I never got to a point where I was like, ugh, I don't want to like read another book about this. And I've done projects that I love the story, but the research was like a slog. And so it was just so squarely in like the wheelhouse of everything that I would say a world that I'm really interested in, but then the kind of stories that I was really interested to write at that time, which was like, I thought that Richard was just this really incredibly complicated, fascinating character that that could be both extremely disarming and extremely controversial, and that could sort of bring like a character study of a guy like that, but into a bigger, more accessible movie.
And they had been trying to get this thing up and running for several years before you came on board, right? So do you know kind of what other takes they had been hearing that just wasn't working for them, and why yours seemed to cut through that fat and get to them?
I've never read like any of the other takes. I mean, we've talked about them a little bit. I mean, I think it was in part about just sort of finding what that window into their lives where the movie was gonna focus. So I think people had pitched soup to nuts, like doing Richard is born and then Venus wins Wimbledon, like that kind of whole span, or different periods. There's a very like sort of famous incident, infamous I guess, where Venus and Serena were playing at Indian Wells and just went through this really horrible racist situation with the crowd there. And so I think that was could have been a interesting framing point for the story. But I really think it was just that I didn't want to try and tell like a biopic in that way. I was more interested in trying to tell like a condensed window of time that could really, if you could find like the sort of that one prism where everything is in this story could be told in this window, everything that like they wanted to achieve, all of the struggles that they were going to go through, and keep it so it didn't have to feel like super elliptical, but it was like, it still felt like it was one scene moving to the next, to the next, to the next, as opposed to, I mean, I think there's some biopics that do it really well, but just like, we're going to show you every scene in someone's life. And
yeah.
So I think that window that I pitched them with was a big part of it.
I'm sure this is going back into memory that may or may not be there, but do you remember your research that weekend, what was the thing that was kind of an aha moment for you of like, oh, then I want to do that. Now I want to do that section of the story. Was it something you read about Richard that kind of flagged it for you, or do you even remember that process?
Yeah, I think there were there were sort of two things. One, I found an old New York Times article that detailed the final match that's in the movie. So this, like, that was, the movie ends with Venus's first pro tournament, and I read an account of what happened there, that she had been, she was up a set and a break against the number one player in the world, and was, which would have been probably the biggest upset in the, history of women's tennis, and then she lost and she didn't win another game in that match. And so that I was like, okay, well, this is, if the movie could build to that idea where she's, we're going to show her debut. Everyone knows what the Williams sisters would go on to become professionally, but if we could do something unexpected with the ending of it and have it be a loss but a victory, sort of in the way that, that Rocky ends, that felt like, okay, maybe that should be the end point of the movie. And then really I just, I read a lot about Richard and sort of started to realize how traumatic a upbringing he had, and how much trauma and racism he had faced in his life, and how that really, I mean, he talks about, really just sort of wanting to do something that was going to put him as well as his family in a place of respect in the world. Mm-hmm. And so once I sort of understood that he had this really clear goal, that I was like, okay, well, I'll take any ride with this guy that he's going to be on, and he can be as bombastic and crazy as possible as he wants to be, because I know underneath, like, that everyone can empathize with that feeling of that he's trying to achieve. So that was a pretty, like, eye-opening thing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So do you have like a writer's group, like a group, like even before writing, like when you were just like getting going, do you write by yourself or do you show it to, I mean, obviously now it's like producers and everything, but do you have like a core group of friends that you pass your script off to?
I don't, and I wish I had. I mean, I think I kind of did it in a vacuum for a really long time. And so I think, one, I probably wasn't as productive as I could have been, like during all those years where I was doing it. I mean, I had a few other friends that were writing either screenplays or fiction and stuff, and sometimes I would share it, but I was really, I don't know, I was like overly protective of it probably. That was a learning curve, because then when I did start sending it out and you do get notes back, you're like, well, fuck, I don't want to, like, I'm like, but I'm done. And so that I wish I had what you two had. I think it would have been really helpful.
Yeah.
But now I work with my wife a lot, so she's like the one who I talk everything through. She reads everything, like from I'll even we'll break scenes together. We're writing something together now. We're like we'll be co-writers on it. She's become that like that sounding board. And
there's nothing that hurts more than when your significant other like really cuts and gives you notes on something, or like real casually, like yeah, this seems okay. I guess speaking to that, you're writing with your wife, and I know you're writing on different projects. Like, how do you balance the different things you work on? Do you have a schedule? Is it just something where it's like deadline? Be like, I have to get this done, so I'm going to do this, and then when that's done, I'm going to work on my next thing. Like, how do you balance your day to day with writing?
If I'm starting something from scratch, I don't want to have to do anything else but that project. And you want to just be like, okay, well, I'm going to I outline, I try to be very prepared before I write a first draft of the script. And then I try to just like really speed through a draft. So, I'll try to be like, okay, well, maybe the first draft is I want to write 10 pages a day. And if okay, so I can maybe have a draft of a script done in, 3 weeks or something. And
damn.
That would be awful. It would be terrible, but it would just be, okay, now I can react to it. Most of the time now, like the tail of other projects just like lingers for a long time. You don't sort of necessarily know when one assignment is going to be over, so that it can just be a clear path to setting the whole day on other things. So I try to be really organized, where I say, okay, I'm going to do, I have rewrites on, there's doing reshoots on this, and I have a couple pages. I'm like, I'll do 2 hours in the morning on that. Then I'm going to do 4 hours on my like first draft of something I'm going to do. And then the last 2 hours of the day, I'm going to do, like the polish on something else. But it never works out like that. I always, like, an email comes in and it blows up your whole day. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to just be doing this. And now all day, Monday, I ended up working on one script. And the thing that I thought was going to be Monday morning, I do like Friday night. And I'm not particularly like, I'm not really a regimented person. So it's the same as everyone else. Like, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just, watch like Eagles highlights for an hour this morning before I start. Yeah.
It doesn't help when I'm probably dropping you texts throughout the day like, yo, you want to grab a drink tonight? Want to play some tennis and have a drink? Hey, where are you, man? What's going on?
But honestly, that stuff helps. Like, if I know that I have something that's like, like if I'm playing tennis or I'm going out to dinner with someone or I'm doing something in the evening that I'm really looking forward to, like, that it helps me be like, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, I really got to grind today.
Yeah.
And I'm good. I'm really good under a deadline. And I think that helps. So I try to set self-imposed things. And I don't like, I know a lot of people like blow deadlines when they're turning in stuff. I really don't like to do it. So I really try to stick to, if I say I'm going to deliver something on a date, I really try to stick to it.
Do you typically work like 6 hours a day, 12 hours a day, or does it just totally vary from day to day?
I try to put in like a regular person's work day, like I have kids, take the kids to school, and then I try to work, from like 8:30 to 6:30. If I'm really up against it, then I'll, I'll work after bedtime, and I'll work from 9 to 11 or something.
You mentioned that you like to have one project at a time, which I totally agree. That would be ideal. But obviously you're not, right? You have so many projects that are in various phases, from rewrites to reshoots to probably originals. And how many at one time do you think you're working on now?
I mean, like today I have four scripts I have to do today. So I've a movie that is doing reshoots right now that I am turning pages in on. Ray Green, who directed King Richard, is directing a movie about Bob Marley that starts shooting in like 6 weeks, and I'm writing that with him, and so we're doing rewrites to prep for that right now, and then my wife and I are writing this TV show that we just sold together, and then I have a spec that I'm finishing.
So we got to get you out of here.
Yeah.
So you can get to work.
It's okay. This was like
thanks for coming on.
This was my fun part of the day. Yeah.
I was going to ask, you went from, developing stuff, selling a TV show that you'd created, writing King Richard, which was, based on IP loosely, but, your original take, to now writing reshoots for something, which I think is a whole other part of your brain, right? A whole other sort of demand on your kind of writing abilities. Can you kind of talk about how writing for reshoots might be different than writing for a rewrite or writing an original thing?
It's pretty, I actually have enjoyed the process of all these different things. So like, I think these scripts have different necessities along the way. The first read that you write, and it's like, it's going to go to execs, it's going to go to your managers, it's going to go to actors that I write a lot of prose in my scripts, because I think that those first reads need to really sell the project in a way, right? And then when director comes on board, it really changes, and they're saying why do you have all this flowery shit in the script? That doesn't help me make the movie. So then then take all that stuff out, and it becomes much more of a practical document, and I still try to hold on to some little, turn of phrase that I was this was pretty good. He's gonna have to figure out a way to shoot around it. But then with a rewrite, it is a different part of your brain, because you're coming in and you're sort of saying okay, what is not working in this script, or what are the areas that need to be fixed, and you're not you're not bringing necessarily maybe your voice to the whole thing. You have to find a way to be a collaborator and to work within the voice of that script. And I think that's kind of a fun project, because you're more of a mechanic, but I've enjoyed that, because you can sort of come in and really see, you'll be writing a script and you'll get really rutted in one idea or one and you're it's very hard when you've been working on something for 2 years and you've chiseled this lane, and you're no, I know this is the right way, but everyone is telling you, well, no, somewhere back there you made a mistake, and you can't pull your head out of your ass and find it. And then if you bring in a new set of eyes, can be easier sometimes for that person to say, oh yeah, I see, on page 30 you fucked up, and if you had just done this, then so it can be kind of nice to have that role for a little while. And the reshoot thing is totally a crazy mind fuck, because it's looking at an edit that's done and then sort of saying, okay, well, one, is there 2 or 3 lines that we could put in here that will totally change the direction of a scene or give information that was missing. And so that's the little garnishes at the end of something. Reshoots has been a puzzle, I think, a little bit, because you're well, I don't know. One, you're in the mindset of a script 3 years ago, and then trying to come back into it at that point is complicated. And I don't know. I'm not explaining this well, but I think they all are sort of different skill sets and different ways to look at things, because you're not, at that point, you can't do anything you want. You're working in a very specific section of the story, and it could be like one scene that is going to define how everything else in the movie is interpreted.
Yeah. It's far more, I feel like, solution based at that stage, right? Where like you only have this scene, this amount of footage. We can't build a whole new set. It has to be this. And you just have to, even if like you're having to jam dialogue in a certain way, like you just have to get the scene to turn the way it needs to turn. And it becomes, I have found in like the editing process, it's so different, but also so fun because it is its own way. I don't ever think that way when I'm writing an original script.
Either do I, but it's really cool to like be in the edit and get to sort of see how, one, the way you imagine something could be totally different now in that scene, but then there's so many ways to mold it even at that point, and it's cool as a writer to get a chance to have a voice in that. And I find though, like with these reshoots, I'll write a lot more alts than I would ever. I generally would not put like an alt in a draft of a script that's going out to anyone, because you want to be like, no, this is the line. I thought about this for 3 weeks. This one perfect thing, and it's like, and I got it to there. And now with this, I'll just write like, here's every thought I had about what this character could say. At this moment.
That's
and
interesting.
Here's 10 different lines, and just. Like I'm at that point, I'm not being as like prescriptive.
Yeah, you're able to sort of let things go for sure.
A little bit, yeah.
All right, I can let Zach go. We're letting Zach go do his 4 million things.
Yeah, next time.
I'll do it again. Let's do it again.
Yeah, let's do it again. Next time we bring your wife on. We talk about a writing partnership in the house.
Yeah.
And that new
and how
project.
that is for relationships. Yeah, that'd be great. It'd be like therapy a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can have couples therapy on this.
Bring out the notes you've given to each other.
Yeah, just life notes. Yeah.
But dude, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. It was so interesting to hear your story, and it's so cool that you beat Josh at tennis all the time.
I wish. I would give it all up to beat Josh at tennis one time.
No. Zach's amazing at tennis, by the way. I feel like I should say it.
That's kind. Yeah,
I got to throw it back.
That says a lot if he says that, though. Take that to heart, I feel like. He never says anything good about other tennis players.
I don't say anything good about anybody.
That felt like a note you get from a studio. You're like, it's really good, but we have. We're going to give you a few pointers.
No way, man.
It's a great start.
It's good. It's good.
All right, quote of the day. I'll take us out.
Take us out,
Okay.
Tasha.
Great writers aren't great first drafters. They're great rewriters. Taika Waititi. Please remember to rate and subscribe. Follow us at ActTwoWriters for more awesome writing stuff. I am at Story Thursday on Instagram or Twitter at Tasha 3.0.
I am Joshua Hallman on Twitter, Josh Hallman on Instagram. Zach, are you even on social media?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
Good man.
So, but I'll follow you guys.
So freaking elusive.
Yeah.
As always, the Act Two podcast is a production of Act Two, a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This episode was edited by Paul Lundquist, my new husband. Music by 4 and 4 Bag, which you can find on Spotify.